Have you ever had that feeling where, the harder you try to learn something really complex, maybe math or physics or even coding,
Uh-huh.
the less it seems to stick? You put in the hours, you focus, you read the chapter like 3 times,
Right. Yeah.
and then you close the book and poof, it's gone. And you just think, maybe I'm just not wired for this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. That feeling, that intellectual brick wall,
Yeah.
it's incredibly common. And what our sources suggest today is, well, it's often not about how smart you are.
It's about the strategy.
Exactly. It's about understanding how your brain actually works. Sometimes trying too hard in that very focused way can actually block you from learning. It's a cognitive roadblock.
Okay, so we're diving deep today using insights from someone who, well, they basically flunked high school math and
Like
science.
self-described queen of the confused, I think.
That's the one. But then went on to get a doctorate in systems engineering
Oh,
by
nice.
figuring out the brain's, secret manual for learning efficiently.
It turns out learning isn't just about raw intelligence. It's much more about using the right techniques.
So that's our mission for this deep dive, right? To unlock that hidden operating system.
Yeah. We're looking at the cognitive science behind mastering learning. Simple, science-backed tricks, really, for building expertise, making memories that last, and maybe most importantly,
Beating procrastination.
beating procrastination. Definitely.
Because the big idea here is learning isn't something you just are. It's something you become. It's about building that mental architecture.
It's a transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts with understanding the brain's two fundamental ways of thinking.
Okay, so let's talk about these two modes. Neuroscientists have names for them, like the attentive state and the resting state network. But maybe we can simplify.
Yeah, let's call them focused mode and diffuse mode. Much easier to handle.
Focused mode. That sounds like what we usually think of as studying, right? Intense concentration.
Exactly. When you're zeroing in on something specific, reading a dense report, trying to memorize facts, working through a math problem you already know how to do, that's your focused mode.
And it's linked to the prefrontal cortex, that logical part of the brain.
That's right. It's rational, analytical, step-by-step thinking. Very sequential.
I like the pinball machine analogy from the sources. Focused mode is like a tight pinball machine.
Yeah, that's a great way to picture it. Your thoughts are the pinball, and the bumpers are concepts you already know well. They're packed tightly together.
So the ball, the thought, bounces around in predictable ways, close to the existing ideas. Good for calculations, refining things.
Perfect for that. For executing procedures you've already learned.
Okay, so what about the other mode, the diffuse mode?
Diffuse mode is, well, different. It's your brain's big picture mode. It tends to kick in when you relax, when your mind wanders a bit, or even when you're doing something automatic, like taking a shower or going for a walk.
So less concentration, more. Background processing.
Kind of. It's linked to the brain's resting state network. It allows different parts of your brain, even really distant areas, to connect and chat with each other.
So if focus mode is the tight pinball machine, diffuse mode is looser.
Much looser. The bumpers are spread way out, so a thought can travel a long way, making unexpected connections across your mental landscape.
Ah, like switching a flashlight beam. Focus is that tight, intense spot.
Right.
And diffuse is casting a wide beam, illuminating the whole room, seeing how things relate.
Exactly. It's not great for detailed calculation, but it's absolutely crucial for new insights, for creativity, for connecting ideas that seemed unrelated before.
And the brain switches between these all the time.
Constantly toggling. But here's the thing. You're usually only consciously aware of being in one mode at a time. And the real challenge, especially with subjects like math or science, comes down to their nature.
How so?
Well, they rely heavily on concepts that are abstract and often encrypted.
Encrypted? What do you mean by encrypted? Like code?
Sort of. Think about something concrete, like a cat. You know what a cat is.
Oh.
But what about the plus sign or pi? Those are abstract ideas.
Okay.
And they're encrypted because a simple symbol, like the multiplication sign X, stands for a whole process repeated addition. It's compressed.
Ah, so for a beginner, those abstract, compressed ideas, they don't have strong bumpers in the focused pinball machine yet.
Exactly. The bumpers are weak, maybe even a bit spongy. You haven't built those solid neural structures.
So just trying to hammer away using only focused mode, it doesn't work. The weak patterns get overwhelmed.
Right. You need strategic practice to really solidify those pathways,
Right.
to turn those spongy bumpers into hard, reliable ones. Hashtag, tag 1.2, the Einstellung effect, and easy does it. And this is where we hit our first major snag. It's called the Einstellung effect.
Einstellung, German word.
Yes, it basically means getting stuck in a mental rut.
Yeah.
When you focus really hard on a problem, you start building a specific neural pathway to solve it. But what if that first pathway you build is flawed? Or just not the best one? Your intense focus actually locks you onto that bad approach.
Tunnel vision. You can't see any other way to solve it, even if a better way is right there.
Precisely. Your focus actively blocks the diffuse mode, the very mode that could give you that fresh perspective, that aha moment.
Is there an example of this?
There's a simple puzzle analogy. Imagine you have some triangles, and you need to make two squares. You might quickly use some triangles to form a rectangle.
Right. Seems like progress.
But now, your focused mind is fixated on keeping that rectangle. It resists the idea of breaking it apart, which is actually what you need to do to form the second square. The focused effort becomes the problem.
Wow. So staring harder at the problem, trying to force it, that can actually make it worse.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
The paradox is, to escape Einstellung, you often need to physically, deliberately turn your focus away.
Let it go for a bit.
Exactly. We see this all the time in stories about breakthroughs. The mathematician Poincaré struggled intensely with a problem for weeks. Nothing.
Total focus, no results.
Right. Then he goes on vacation, completely disconnects, steps onto a bus, and boom, the solution just floods his mind.
So the intense focus primed the pump.
Yes. It loaded the information, but it was the diffuse mode kicking in during that relaxed bus ride that actually connected the dots.
So the takeaway is resting isn't slacking off.
It's strategic. It's part of the process.
Yeah.
You need ways to activate that diffuse mode. That's where things like the 3 Bs come in.
Bed, bath, or bus.
Yeah, or just any low-intensity activity. Walking, jogging, listening to instrumental music, even just staring out the window. Anything that occupies your mind just enough to stop consciously focusing on the problem.
Letting the background processes work their magic.
It allows that mental mortar to set between the bricks you laid down with your focused work.
But how do you convince yourself it's okay to step away? I mean, it feels like procrastinating, right? That guilt factor.
That's a huge hurdle. You have to reframe it. It's not a break from the work. It is part of the work. Trusting that your diffuse mode is actually consolidating information. Sometimes, a 20-minute walk is genuinely more productive than another hour of just banging your head against the wall in focus mode.
Okay, so we need to toggle between focused and diffuse.
Yeah.
Got it. But once we're in focus mode, how do we make sure the information actually sticks, especially given how limited our attention seems to be?
Right. We need to talk about working memory. That's your brain's sort of mental blackboard where you hold information you're actively thinking about right now.
And it's tiny, isn't it?
Shockingly small. Research suggests it can only hold about maybe 4 pieces of information simultaneously. 4 chunks.
4 things. Like a juggler with only 4 balls. How do we even function?
That's where chunking comes in. It's probably the single most important idea for learning efficiently.
Okay, what exactly is a chunk?
A chunk isn't just random bits of info. It's a mental connection, a unit where separate pieces of information are bound together through meaning or use. Once you form a solid chunk, something complex that might have taken up all 4 slots.
Now only takes up 1 slot.
Exactly. It becomes a single, smooth idea. Think of it like a zip file for your brain, or like knowing a single web link that connects to a huge, complex web page. Remembering the link is easy, freeing up those other 3 slots.
So chunking is how we bypass that 4-item limit.
It's how we build complexity. But it has to be conceptual chunking, not just rote memorization. There's a fascinating story about this. Solomon Zhirashevsky,
The memory guy.
the memory guy, journalist in the 1930s Soviet Union with a truly unbelievable memory. Could repeat speeches verbatim years later, never took notes.
Sounds amazing, like the ultimate student.
You'd think so. But he had a massive problem. He struggled deeply with understanding abstract concepts
How could he remember everything but not understand it?
because his memory was just lists, individual data points.
Yeah.
When asked about something like, say, continental drift, he could recite every word the lecturer used perfectly,
Wow.
but he couldn't synthesize it. He couldn't see the big picture, the core concept, the meaning that linked all those words together into a single, coherent chunk. He saw every single tree, but the sheer volume of detail prevented him from ever seeing the forest.
So just memorizing facts isn't enough. You need the connections, the meaning, the chunked.
Precisely. Memorization isn't mastery.
So how do we build proper, meaningful chunks? There are steps, right?
3 key steps. First, focused attention. You absolutely need that tight focus mode to even gather the basic information, the pieces you want to link together.
Yeah.
No distractions.
Step 1, focus. Got it.
Second, Understanding. This is the superglue. You have to actively work to grasp the underlying idea, the logic, or meaning that connects those pieces. Why do they fit together?
Okay, focus, then understand the connection. But you warned about this earlier, that aha moment of understanding feels great, but it's not the end goal.
Not at all. That's a classic trap. Feeling like you understand it isn't the same as having truly learned it, having made it durable. Which brings us to the crucial third step. Context.
Context, how does that work?
Practice. But not just any practice. You need to use that new chunk in different situations. Solve related problems, but also unrelated problems where you have to choose whether or not to use that chunk.
Ah, so you learn when it applies and when it doesn't.
Exactly. It builds the pathways so you can access the chunk from different starting points. It shows you how that chunk fits into the bigger picture of everything else you know. That's what makes it robust. Hashtag tag 2.2, the illusion of competence and retrieval practice.
Okay, so if you skip that third step, the context part, that's when you fall into trouble.
Big trouble. You fall right into the illusion of competence.
Where you think you know it, but you really don't.
Precisely. It happens most often with passive review, rereading your notes, highlighting textbook chapters.
Stuff that feels like studying.
It feels productive because the material is right there in front of you. It's fluent, easy to process. Your brain mistakes that ease, that familiarity for actual mastery.
Like mistaking recognizing someone's face for actually knowing their name and history.
Excellent analogy. Students spend hours doing this rereading, highlighting, thinking they're learning, but it's often just labor in vain. The memory traces are incredibly faint.
So the mental hyperlink isn't actually saved properly.
Not really. It's like it's still just in the browser cache, not downloaded to the hard drive. The fix. You need to force your brain to work harder during learning. You need active retrieval practice.
Retrieval practice, meaning pulling the information out of your head.
Exactly. Trying to recall the material without looking at the source. Close the book, look away, try to summarize the key points. This struggle, this effort of pulling it out, is what actually strengthens the neural pathways. It's far more effective than passively rereading.
Okay, practical tip time. How can someone start doing this, like, right now?
Super simple. Use the pause and recall technique. Read a page, or maybe watch a few minutes of a lecture video. Then pause. Look away.
Don't look at the notes.
Don't look. Try to recall the main ideas. Maybe say them out loud or jot them down. If you can't recall it easily, that's your cue.
That's the gap in your learning.
Exactly. That tells you what you need to go back and review. That little bit of struggle is where the learning happens. It's cementing the chunk.
What about highlighting? So many people love their highlighters. Is it useless?
Well, excessive highlighting can be counterproductive. It can trick you. The physical motion feels like you're doing something, engaging with the material.
But you might just be coloring, not thinking.
Right. Your hand is moving, but your brain might think, okay, got it, without actually encoding anything. If you do highlight, be very selective. Read this section first, then go back and highlight only the absolute key phrase or concept. Minimal highlighting.
So less is more.
Much more. The best practice is still things like working homework problems yourself before looking at the solution. That's pure retrieval. Hashtag 2.3, the critical role of sleep.
Okay, retrieval practice builds the chunks, but what about making them stick long-term? We can't forget about sleep, can we?
Absolutely not. Sleep is crucial. We tend to think of it as downtime, but your brain is incredibly active during sleep, especially for learning and memory.
Doing what, exactly? Cleaning house.
That's a big part of it. While you're awake, just thinking uses energy and creates toxic byproducts in your brain, like metabolic waste.
Ooh.
Yeah. During deep sleep, something amazing happens. Your brain cells actually shrink temporarily.
They shrink.
Yeah, they contract, which increases the space between the cells. This allows cerebrospinal fluid to wash through more easily and flush out all those toxins that built up during the day.
Like a nightly power wash for the brain.
Pretty much. If you skip sleep, those toxins build up. You literally can't think as clearly. Which is why, studying for 1 hour when you're well rested is way better than trying to cram for 3 hours when you're exhausted.
Makes sense. But sleep does more than just clean, right? It helps with the memories themselves.
Oh, yeah. Memory consolidation is the other huge job. Sleep actively strengthens the neural patterns related to what you learned that day. It's like saving the file properly.
And it tidies things up, too.
It does. It seems to prune away the less important bits of memories, the clutter, while strengthening and even rehearsing the more important or difficult parts.
Rehearsing while you sleep.
It appears so.
Yeah.
The brain replays and reinforces key neural patterns. And there's even evidence that if you review challenging material shortly before going to sleep.
You're more likely to dream about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that dreaming process seems to be really important for integrating the new stuff with what you already know, making connections, deepening your understanding. You're literally problem solving and learning in your sleep.
All right, we have the learning strategies. Focus diffuse modes, chunking, retrieval, sleep. But none of it works if we can't actually sit down and do it. Let's talk about procrastination.
The arch nemesis of learners everywhere.
Yeah, and it feels like a personal failing, doesn't it? Like, I just don't have enough willpower.
That's how most people see it. But the science suggests something different. Procrastination isn't really a failure of character. It's more like a bad habit, a deeply ingrained automatic response.
A habit like brushing your teeth.
Kinda, yeah. Think of it as a zombie habit. An automatic routine your brain runs, usually to avoid something unpleasant and get a quick hit of relief or pleasure instead.
Comfort-seeking zombie. I like that.
And the key insight here is that willpower. Well, it's a finite resource. It gets depleted, like a muscle gets tired. You can't just rely on gritting your teeth all day long.
So instead of fighting the zombie head-on with limited willpower, we need to understand its routine, outsmart it.
Exactly. We need to understand the habit loop. Most habits, including procrastination, follow a four-part structure.
Okay, what are the 4 parts?
First, there's the cue. That's the trigger. What launches the zombie routine? It could be a specific time of day, a location like your desk, an emotion like feeling overwhelmed, or even just seeing that difficult task on your list.
So step 1 is figuring out your specific triggers.
Yes. Self-awareness is key.
Oh.
What kicks off that urge to avoid? Second part is the routine. This is the zombie action itself. Instead of starting the hard task, what do you do automatically? Check your phone, get a snack, tidy your desk for the 10th time.
Uh-oh, hitting close to home.
That routine is the part you have the most power to change, to rewire. Third, there's the reward. Every habit sticks around because it delivers something good, even if it's just temporary relief.
With procrastination, the reward is avoiding the discomfort of the hard task, right? Moving your attention to something easier or more fun.
Precisely. It feels good in the moment. To change the habit, you need to build in a new, healthier reward for the new routine you want to establish.
Okay, cue, routine, reward. What's the 4th part?
The 4th part is belief. Underneath it all, habits are strong because we often subconsciously believe we can't change. I'm just a procrastinator. I'll never be organized.
That underlying narrative.
Yeah. To make lasting change, you have to genuinely believe change is possible. You need to cultivate that belief.
That arsenic eaters example you mentioned earlier is kind of wild in this context.
It is extreme, but it illustrates the power of incremental habit and adaptation. People literally trained their bodies, step by tiny step, to handle lethal poison. It wasn't just belief, it was the physical change driven by the consistent small action.
So if the body can adapt that drastically through habit, our mental habits around procrastination aren't set in stone either.
Not at all. It shows that consistent, small, daily actions can fundamentally change the system, even a system as stubborn as procrastination.
Okay, so practically, how do we target that routine part? How do we respond differently to the cue?
You can change your environment. If your phone is the cue for distraction, leave it in another room when you need to focus. That's an environmental fix.
Make the unwanted routine harder to do.
Exactly. Or establish a new ritual. Maybe you have a specific study chair you only use for focused work. Or a set time each day. You lay out your materials beforehand. You give your zombie brain the structure it likes, but you point it towards productivity instead of avoidance. Hashtag 3.2 process versus product and the Pomodoro technique. And here's maybe the most powerful mental switch you can make. Shift your focus from product to process.
Product versus process, what does that mean?
Most of us get overwhelmed because we focus on the product, the finished thing. I have to write this entire 10-page essay, or I need to solve all 5 of these really hard physics problems.
Yeah, that sounds daunting. That definitely triggers my, maybe I'll just check email first, Lambi.
Right, because focusing on the big scary product triggers a pain response in the brain. But the process is just about the flow of time, the actions you take.
So instead of write the whole paper, you focus on what?
You focus on, I will sit down and work on this task without distraction for the next 25 minutes. That's the process. It doesn't matter how much you finish in that time. The goal is simply to engage with the process.
Ah, you detach from the outcome for that short period.
Exactly. Your zombie brain doesn't mind marching along a clearly defined path for a short time, nearly as much as it dreads facing that huge, scary mountain of the final product.
And this sounds like it leads directly into the Pomodoro technique.
It's tailor-made for it. The Pomodoro is basically weaponized process focus. You set a timer for 25 minutes, you work, totally focused, no interruptions.
Just 25 minutes?
Just 25 minutes. Then, crucially, when the timer goes off, you stop. And you immediately give yourself a small, pre-planned reward.
Like checking your phone for a minute, or stretching, or getting a piece of chocolate.
Whatever works for you. But the reward has to be immediate. That's what hacks the habit loop. It starts associating the effort of working with the pleasure of the reward.
So you're training the zombie, do the short burst of work, then you get a treat.
Precisely. Over time, this can build learned industriousness. The tasks themselves start to feel less painful, maybe even a little satisfying, because your brain anticipates the reward.
Okay, that handles the routine and reward. What about the belief part? Believing you can change.
That's where mental contrasting comes in handy. It's a motivation technique.
How does it work?
You vividly imagine your desired positive future. What will life be like when you've achieved your goal? Maybe you see yourself as a successful graduate, financially stable, enjoying life. Really feel it.
Okay, the dream.
Then you immediately pivot and sharply contrast that with your current, perhaps less desirable reality. The struggles, the frustrations, the clunker car, whatever it is.
Why do that?
Because that contrast, the gap between the dream and the reality, creates a powerful motivating energy. It highlights what's at stake and provides the spark needed to actually start implementing the new process, like starting that first Pomodoro.
Got it. And lastly, how does planning fit in? You mentioned planner journaling.
Yes, this isn't just making a to-do list. It's about breaking down those big, scary products, like finish thesis, into small, concrete, daily process tasks.
Like work on chapter 3 for 2 Pomodoros.
Exactly. Write these down the night before. Why? Because it lets your diffuse mode chew on them overnight, makes it easier to start the next day. But here's a key part many people miss. You should also plan your quitting time.
Plan when you'll stop working.
Yes. Maybe it's a firm 5:000 p.m. rule. Work stops then, period. This does 2 things. It reinforces the reward guilt-free downtime, which makes the work sustainable, and it ensures you actually get that crucial diffuse mode time, preventing burnout.
Okay, let's assume we're beating procrastination, we're doing our Pomodoros, we're chunking. How do we make sure this learning really lasts, like for the final each months away or even years later?
Right, we need strategies for building durable long-term memory. This often involves making the initial learning feel a bit harder, counterintuitively.
Harder learning leads to better recall.
Often, yes. The first technique is spaced repetition. Simply put, reviewing materials spread out over time, say once today, again in 2 days, then again in a week, is vastly more effective than cramming.
Cramming being like reviewing the same thing 20 times the night before the test.
Exactly. That's called massed practice. Spaced repetition beats massed practice, hands down, for long-term retention.
It's like building muscle, isn't it? You need rest days between workouts for the muscle to actually grow. You can't just lift weights for 24 hours straight.
That's a perfect analogy. Your brain connections, your synapses, need time to consolidate and strengthen after a learning session. Spacing gives them that time. Cramming just overwhelms working memory without letting the long-term structures form properly.
Okay, so space out reviews. What else? You mentioned distinguishing between overlearning and interleaving.
Yes, this is important. Overlearning is when you keep practicing something after you've already mastered it in that single study session.
Like doing 50 simple addition problems after you already know how to do addition perfectly.
Exactly. It feels productive, like you're really drilling it in, but the benefits drop off really quickly. It's often not the best use of your limited study time. It builds short-term fluency, but not necessarily long-term flexibility.
So once you get a concept or technique down in one session, maybe move on.
Move on, or better yet, switch to interleaving.
Interleaving. What's that?
Interleaving means mixing up different types of problems or concepts within a single study session. Problems that require different strategies to solve.
So instead of doing all the problems from Chapter 9, Section 4.
You do one problem from 9.4, then maybe one from 9.2, which uses a different method, then one from 9.1, then back to 9.4. You mix it up.
That sounds way harder and probably more frustrating during the study session itself.
It absolutely is harder in the moment, but that's why it works so well for long-term learning. It forces your brain to constantly figure out which strategy to apply. It can't just blindly copy the steps from the previous problem.
So it's not just learning how to use a tool, but learning when to choose that tool from your toolbox.
Precisely. Interleaving builds that crucial ability to discriminate between problem types and select the right approach. It creates deeper understanding and makes your knowledge much more flexible and accessible when you face new, unfamiliar problems. Like on an exam, hashtag 4.2 enhancing memory with visuospatial tools.
Okay, spacing and interleaving make learning durable. What about tapping into the brain's natural superpowers? I read that our visual and spatial memory is incredibly strong.
It really is. Evolutionarily, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Our ancestors absolutely needed to remember where the food was, where the dangers were, how to get back home, so our brains developed this, supersized capacity for visuospatial memory.
Remembering places and images comes more naturally than remembering abstract formulas or lists of facts.
Much more naturally for most people, and we can leverage that. We can translate abstract, hard-to-remember information into vivid, memorable visual images. This taps into that powerful memory system and actually frees up some space in our limited working memory.
So take something abstract like AFMA, Newton's second law.
And instead of just memorizing the letters, create a bizarre, unforgettable image. Maybe you picture a giant flying mule, F for flying, M for mule crashing with incredible acceleration, A, into a brick wall.
A flying mule. Okay, that's definitely weird enough to remember.
The weirder, the funnier, the more exaggerated, the better. Because novelty helps things stick. These crazy images connect directly to the powerful visuospatial centers in your brain, bypassing the purely verbal route.
And the ultimate technique for this is the memory palace, right? That ancient Greek method.
Yes, the memory palace, or method of loci, it's incredibly powerful. You choose a place you know extremely well, like your house or your daily walk to work, a familiar physical location.
Okay, I can picture my house.
Now, you take the things you want to remember, maybe items on a list or steps in a process, and you turn each one into a striking visual image, like our flying mule. Then you mentally place each image at a specific spot along your familiar route or in specific rooms of your house.
So the first item on the list is doing something crazy at my front door. The second item is in the hallway. The third is making a mess in the kitchen.
Exactly. You create a mental journey. Because you know the layout of your house perfectly, that familiar structure acts as a mental filing system for the new, weird images. To recall the information, you just take a mental walk through your house and see the images you place there.
You're basically attaching new, fragile information onto a strong, existing mental scaffold.
That's a perfect way to put it. There was that great example of Trace McGrand learning the layers of the epidermis.
Right. Imagine walking down to his basement.
And the floor was covered in sharp, painful spines for the stratum spinosum. Then the next area had gritty sugar all over for the stratum granulosum. It turns an abstract list into a concrete, navigable experience.
That's brilliant. Beyond memory palaces, what about simpler tools like metaphors?
Metaphors and analogies are huge. They're like instant chunks almost. They help you grasp the core of a complex or abstract idea by relating it to something simple and familiar you already understand.
Like thinking of electrical current as water flowing through a pipe.
Exactly. Or remembering that a cation is positive, it has a plus charge, and it sounds like cat. These simple analogies act as temporary mental scaffolds while you're building the real, detailed understanding. They also help you break out of that Einstein effect by giving you a fresh way to look at the concept. Hashtag 4.3, the law of serendipity.
So we've covered focused and diffuse thinking, chunking, memory, procrastination, spacing, interleaving, visual tools. As we wrap up, there's one last idea that kind of ties it all together. The law of serendipity.
Ah, yes. Lady Luck favors the one who tries.
But it's more than just trying randomly, isn't it?
Much more. It's that luck, or serendipity, those unexpected insights, those fortunate discoveries, tends to favor the prepared mind. That sudden intuition, that flash of insight that seems to come from nowhere.
Like Poincaré on the bus.
Exactly. That wasn't random magic. It was the result of all the prior hard work. He had built the necessary chunks through focused effort. He had allowed his diffuse mode time to work. He had essentially prepared his mental environment.
So the serendipity was his well-prepared mind finally making the right connection.
Precisely. By consistently using these learning strategies, building a rich library of chunks, practicing retrieval, spacing, interleaving, using analogies, toggling modes, you are creating that fertile ground. You're stocking your mental pantry.
So when a new challenge or problem comes along,
your prepared mind, your vast network of interconnected chunks, is much more likely to spontaneously offer up a solution. That intuition, that serendipity, becomes less about luck and more about the natural outcome of effective, sustained learning practices. You're making your own luck in a cognitive sense. Hashtag #TagAlatre.
Wow. Okay, that was definitely a deep dive into the mechanics of learning better. Let's try to boil down the key takeaways for everyone listening.
Sounds good.
First, it seems fundamental to understand and consciously toggle between those two brain modes. Focused for drilling down and building the pieces, and diffuse for seeing the big picture and making connections.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And second, ditch the passive rereading. Embrace retrieval practice, constantly testing yourself, recalling information, because that's how you build solid, meaningful chunks and avoid tricking yourself with that illusion of competence.
Right. Third, tackle procrastination not with sheer willpower, but by understanding the habit loop. Focus on the process, like the 25-minute Pomodoro, and building in an immediate reward. Outsmart the zombie, don't just fight it.
And finally, for truly deep, durable learning, use techniques like spacing your practice over time, interleaving different types of problems, and leveraging your powerful visual spatial memory with things like crazy images and the memory palace.
It really seems like the message from these sources is that how you learn can be much more important than just raw talent. Persistence and good strategy win out.
And interestingly, skill often comes before passion. You might not love a subject now, but as you use these techniques to get better at it, to build those chunks, the passion can actually follow the confidence.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Think about a subject you currently avoid, something you feel you dislike or just can't do.
Maybe it's math, or learning an instrument, or public speaking.
What's one tiny, process-focused habit you could start today? Just one 25-minute Pomodoro, followed by a small reward.
Trust the process. Enlist those zombies to work for you, not against you. Build the skill brick by brick, chunk by chunk.
And see if maybe, just maybe, the passion follows. Thank you for digging into these sources with us today.
My pleasure. Lots to think about.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've talked about the focused and diffuse modes, about chunking information. But okay, how do we make these chunks, these concepts, really stick in our long-term memory?
Right, that's the next big piece. It's about memory enhancement, and specifically tapping into something humans are, well, surprisingly brilliant at.
Which is?
Our visual spatial memory. Think about it from an evolutionary perspective. Remembering where things are, where the good hunting ground was, the layout of a new territory, how to get back to the cave that was absolutely critical for survival.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. We needed to navigate.
Exactly. So our brains develop this incredible capacity for remembering places and spatial relationships. But what we're not naturally good at is remembering abstract stuff. Names, numbers, lists of facts.
Things that didn't help us find food or avoid danger back then.
Precisely. So the most effective memory techniques, they don't try to force the brain to do what it's bad at. Instead, they kind of hijack that existing supersized visuospatial system.
Ah, so you turn the abstract thing into something visual or spatial.
You got it. And the classic, most powerful example of this is the memory palace technique. It's ancient, goes way back to the Greeks, and it works incredibly well.
Memory palace. Sounds impressive. How does it actually work? Do I need a blueprint?
No blueprint needed. You just use a place you know extremely well, like your own house, your apartment, maybe your daily walk to work, or even a building on campus you know inside out.
Okay, I can picture my house. Then what?
Then you take the things you want to remember, say items on a list, key concepts from a lecture, historical dates, and you create vivid, memorable, maybe even bizarre visual images for each item.
Bizarre helps.
Oh, definitely. The weirder and more multisensory the image, the better it sticks. And then you mentally place these images sequentially in different locations within your familiar memory palace.
Right, you mentioned the anatomy example before, the skin layers. Let's walk through that again slowly because that makes it really clear.
Okay, perfect. So you need to learn the 5 layers of the epidermis. You choose your house as your palace. You start maybe in the basement. That represents the deepest layer, the stratum basal.
Basement, basal, got it.
Then, to remember the next layer, the stratum spinosum, you imagine walking up the basement stairs, but they're covered in, like, sharp, painful cactus spines. Really visualize feeling them prick your feet.
Ouch. Okay. Spines, spinosum, that's definitely sticking.
Good. Then you get to the next room, maybe the kitchen. For the stratum granulosum, you picture the entire kitchen floor covered, inches deep, in white granulated sugar. It crunches under your feet.
Granulated sugar. Granulosum. Okay, I see the pattern. You link the sound or meaning of the word to a crazy image in a specific spot.
Exactly. You continue like that, placing images for the stratum lucidum. Maybe the living room is filled with bright, lucid light. And the stratum corneum. Perhaps the front door is covered in tough, horny material like a corn husk, in distinct locations.
So when you need to recall the layers.
You just mentally walk through your house. You see the basement, you think basal. You see the spiny stairs, spinosum. The sugary kitchen, granulosum. You're not trying to recall abstract Latin terms from thin air. You're retrieving vivid images anchored in a familiar space.
That feels much more doable. You're leveraging something your brain already does well, remembering places.
It taps right into that visual spatial superpower. And it works for almost anything. Shopping lists, key points for a presentation, vocabulary words, historical events.
It transforms rote memorization into something creative, almost like storytelling in your mind.
That's a great way to put it. And this idea of making things visual and meaningful extends beyond just lists. It's actually crucial for understanding really abstract subjects like math and science.
Which brings us to equation poems. That sounds counterintuitive. Equations seem like the opposite of poetry.
They could feel that way. The source material mentions the poet Sylvia Plath, who wrote about this dread she felt watching math equations on the board, how her mind just went blank and dead. It was pure abstraction to her.
I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling, just symbols, no meaning.
Right. But then you have someone like the physicist Richard Feynman. He wasn't just manipulating symbols. He understood that thoughts, even highly complex mathematical or physical ideas, can be, and often should be, visual. He saw the relationships, the dance behind the symbols.
So how do we get there? How do we write an equation poem if we're not Feynman?
It's about personalization and analogy. You have to take the abstract equation and make it concrete, make it something you can almost feel or see in your mind's eye. You need to breathe life into it.
Okay, let's take a classic example, like Newton's second law. F equals m times a. Force equals mass times acceleration. How do I make that a poem?
Instead of just memorizing Feynman, you need to, step inside it. Feel the A, the acceleration. Imagine being pushed back into your car seat. As it speeds up, that feeling is acceleration.
Okay, I can feel that.
Then think about M, the mass. Don't just see the letter M. Picture something massive like a giant boulder. Feel its inertia, its stubborn laziness, how hard it is to get it moving.
Right, it resists change.
Exactly. And F, the force. That's the push or pull you need to apply to overcome that boulder's laziness, to make it accelerate. So F becomes a story. The effort needed, F, depends on how lazy the object is, M, and how quickly you want to change its speed, A.
You're translating the symbols into a felt experience, a relationship between concepts.
Precisely. You're building an intuitive understanding, grounding the abstract math in something physical or visual that your brain, especially the right hemisphere, which deals well with the big picture, can grasp more easily.
This reminds me of those stories about Einstein imagining riding on a beam of light to figure out relativity.
Yes. Or Barbara McClintock, the Nobel laureate geneticist, who said she imagined the genetic elements she studied almost like personal friends, understanding their personalities. They weren't just data points. They were actors in a drama she could visualize.
So the key is simplification, personalization, finding an analogy or a visual that makes the abstract concept real to you.
Absolutely. You have to make it your own. That process of translating it into your own mental language, that's writing the equation poem. It builds much deeper understanding than just manipulating symbols you don't truly grasp.
Okay, so we've chunked our information. We've used techniques like the memory palace and equation poems to make it memorable and meaningful. How do we lock it in for the long haul?
Now we get to the crucial part about timing and practice. It's not just what you practice, but how and when. Two key concepts here are spaced repetition and retrieval practice.
Spaced repetition, that's the opposite of cramming, right?
Exactly. Cramming, trying to learn something by repeating it 20 times in one night, feels productive in the moment. You get this feeling like, okay, I've got it now, but it's often an illusion.
The illusion of competence.
Right. It's like building a brick wall really fast without letting the mortar set between layers. It might stand for a little while, but it's weak and likely to crumble. Your neural connections need time to solidify.
So spaced repetition is like building the wall slowly, one layer a day, letting the mortar dry.
Perfect analogy. You review the material, maybe vocabulary words, a math technique, a historical fact. But you space out those reviews over several days, then maybe weeks. Each time you successfully recall it after a gap, the connection gets stronger.
It feels less efficient, maybe, because you're not intensely focused for hours, but it's actually building a much more durable memory trace.
Much more durable. That spacing allows the synaptic connections to actually consolidate. Think of it like exercising a muscle resting between workouts is when the muscle actually rebuilds and gets stronger. Same idea for your neurons.
Okay, that makes sense. And what about retrieval practice? How is that different from just rereading my notes?
This is hugely important. Retrieval practice means actively pulling the information out of your own head. Self-testing, using flashcards, trying to solve a problem without looking at the solution.
As opposed to passive review, like just rereading the chapter or looking over highlighted notes.
Exactly. Passive review is incredibly deceptive. The information is right there in front of you, so your brain says, yep, familiar, I know this. But you don't truly know if you know it until you try to retrieve it from memory without cues.
That's why highlighting can be dangerous. It feels like studying, but it's often just passive recognition.
It really can be. The recommendation from the source is, if you do highlight, be incredibly selective, like maybe one sentence per paragraph, maximum. Just enough to force you to identify the absolute core idea, not just color the page.
So the effort involved in recalling the information is what actually strengthens the memory.
That's the core finding. The struggle to retrieve is what signals to your brain, this is important, strengthen this connection. It's much more effective than passively seeing the information again.
So for you listening, this means putting away the book and testing yourself, making flashcards, explaining the concept out loud to someone else, or even just to yourself. That act of recall is the key.
It really is. And when you combine these ideas, creating meaningful chunks, using visuospatial techniques like the memory palace, practicing retrieval, and spacing out that practice over time, you build a really robust knowledge structure.
And the sources argue this isn't just about becoming a good test taker. This kind of deep, structured memory is actually the foundation for creativity.
Absolutely. The more concepts, techniques, and facts you have deeply memorized and chunked effectively, the more mental building blocks your diffuse mode has to play with. You're creating this rich network of interconnected ideas, which allows for those wild, unexpected possibilities for future connections that lead to innovation. Good memory fuels creativity.
Which takes us nicely into this whole idea of talent. We often think of it as something you're born with, especially in fields like math and science. But the message here is quite different.
Very different. It's about sculpting your brain, about the idea that talent isn't just given, it's created.
Yeah.
And the prime example is Santiago Ramon y Cajal, the father of modern neuroscience.
Right. You mentioned him before, the rebellious kid who hated math and science, became a Nobel Prize winner.
That's the one. He was apparently a terrible student in his early years, more interested in art and building cannons. But he came to believe passionately that persistence and focused effort could literally change the brain, that people with average intelligence could essentially sculpt themselves into capable thinkers.
And neuroscience now backs that up. The idea that our brains aren't fixed.
It does. We know the brain continues developing well into our 20s. A key part of this is myelination, the process where a fatty sheath, myelin, wraps around nerve axons. Think of it like insulating an electrical wire.
What does the insulation do?
It dramatically speeds up the transmission of nerve signals. And importantly, the amount of myelin increases with focused practice on a particular skill. So when you practice something deliberately, you're literally building faster, more efficient neural highways for that skill in your brain.
So Cottle was physically changing his brain structure through his persistent work.
That's the idea. He was building those high-speed connections between different brain regions, linking the control centers with the knowledge centers. He himself admitted he wasn't particularly quick-witted or gifted with rote memory.
But his persistence made up for it. He famously said something like, work substitutes for talent.
Or, better yet, that it creates talent.
Yeah.
That's the core message. His own life was proof. And we see this elsewhere, too. Think about top chess players. Studies have shown many don't have exceptionally high IQs.
Really? I always assumed they were geniuses.
They're geniuses at chess, yes, but often their general IQ is average. What they do have is thousands upon thousands of hours of deliberate practice, analyzing positions, studying games. They've built incredibly specialized, highly myelinated neural circuits just for chess.
So the takeaway for us is that persistence and strategic practice can genuinely build ability, maybe even more than raw intelligence.
That seems to be the case. Don't underestimate the power of consistent, focused effort to literally reshape your brain and build expertise.
But that kind of effort involves, well, failing sometimes, getting stuck. How do we reconcile building talent with the frustration of making mistakes?
That's a crucial mindset shift. We need to reframe failure. It's not an endpoint, it's data. It's part of the process. The story of Professor Geraldo Buddy Saucedo is fantastic here.
The one kicked out of university with a terrible GPA.
Yeah, 0.4 GPA. He came back later and became a very successful math professor. And his motto became, Practice is where you are supposed to fail.
I like that. Homework isn't about getting it all right the first time.
It's about exhausting your failure rate. It's a low-stakes environment where you find the gaps in your understanding, where you make the mistakes, figure out why they're mistakes, and correct them before the high-stakes test or real-world application.
But how do you avoid that feeling of just giving up when you fail repeatedly? Learned helplessness.
That's where the distinction between productive failure and just, well, failing comes in. Productive failure means you struggle, you hit a wall, maybe you get frustrated, but then you don't just stop. You actively try a different strategy. You step back, let the diffuse mode work, maybe consult your notes, or ask for help on that specific sticking point. You're using the failure diagnostically.
Okay, so failure is information gathering for the next attempt.
Exactly. And this ties into the importance of learning things actively yourself rather than just passively receiving information.
Like the Ben Carson example,
Yeah.
the neurosurgeon who stopped going to lectures.
Right. Now, obviously, skipping all your classes is probably not advisable for most people. But the principle is what's important. He found that passively listening wasn't working for him. He needed to actively grapple with the material in the books, to build the chunks himself, to write his own mental equation poems.
He took control of the learning process.
He did. And that active struggle, that process of figuring things out for yourself, even if it involves some initial confusion or failure, often leads to much deeper, more flexible understanding.
Which is more valuable in the real world, right? Not just recalling memorized facts, but being able to apply knowledge in new situations.
Definitely. Think about those science Olympiad competitions mentioned in the source. Sometimes the students who ace classroom tests, who are great at recalling memorized chunks, falter when they face a really novel problem that requires combining ideas in unexpected ways.
Whereas the students who maybe struggled more independently
And might have developed more flexibility, more ability to think on their feet because they've spent more time actively wrestling with the concepts themselves, not just memorizing procedures handed to them. They own the knowledge more deeply.
Okay, this is all great for individual learning, but we don't learn in a vacuum. How does teamwork fit into this picture, and how do we avoid some of the pitfalls, like overconfidence?
Great questions. Let's tackle overconfidence first, because it's a huge trap. Our focused mode, while powerful, can also lock us into a wrong answer with absolute certainty.
We feel totally right, even when we're dead wrong.
Exactly. And the source uses the analogy of Fred, the hypothetical patient with right hemisphere brain damage.
What happened to Fred?
Well, damage to the right hemisphere can impair the ability to see the bigger picture, to appreciate context, incongruity, humor. Fred became very literal, dogmatic, overly confident in his flawed judgments, and unable to perform reality checks.
So the right hemisphere is like our internal skeptic, the part that says, hang on, does that really make sense?
That's a good way to think about it. It provides that broader perspective, the sanity check against the left hemisphere's potentially narrow sequential focus. Without it, you can confidently march down completely the wrong path.
So how do we deliberately engage that right hemisphere, that reality check?
A few ways. One is simply to step back. When you finish a problem or write a paragraph, don't just move on. Pause. Shift your attention briefly. Maybe look out the window, think about something else for a moment. This helps disengage the focused mode.
Let the diffuse mode have a quick look.
Kind of. And then re-engage, but try to look at your work with fresh eyes. Explain it to yourself. Check it, using a slightly different method if possible. Does the answer seem reasonable in magnitude? Did you answer the actual question asked? This forces different neural pathways to evaluate the work.
It's like getting a second opinion from yourself.
Exactly. And the other powerful way to get a second opinion is, of course, teamwork.
Your external reality check.
Right. Working with others is one of the best ways to catch your own errors, the ones you're blind to because of einstelling or simple overconfidence. Others see your work from a different perspective with different assumptions.
But the source makes an interesting point about who you should team up with. It talks about the strength of weak ties. Acquaintances being more valuable than close friends. That seems backwards.
It does seem counterintuitive, but the research supports it, especially for getting new ideas or even job hunting. Think about it. Your close friends likely travel in the same circles, read similar things, know the same people. They share a lot of your existing knowledge chunks and perspectives.
So they reinforce your bubble.
To some extent, yes. Your acquaintances, however, people you know less well, maybe from different departments, different hobbies, different backgrounds, they operate in different spheres. They have access to different information, different ways of thinking.
They're like bridges to whole other networks of ideas, an interpersonal diffuse mode, as the source puts it.
That's a perfect description. They bring in fresh perspectives. They can break your focused mode log jams or introduce you to entirely new concepts.
Teamwork also just makes you better under pressure, right? Having to explain your reasoning out loud.
Absolutely. It's public practice. Having to articulate your thought process clarifies it for you and exposes any weaknesses. And even if you're more introverted, there are ways to collaborate effectively.
Like the dorm room door example.
Yeah, Professor Paul Blower's technique. He and a classmate would leave complex problem solutions and detailed feedback for each other on their dorm room doors. They got the benefits of collaboration air checking, different perspectives, without needing constant face-to-face interaction.
So the key is the collaborative thinking and feedback, not necessarily sitting side by side the whole time.
Exactly. Find a method that works for you and your study partners.
Okay, so we need memory techniques, persistence, failure management, reality checks, teamwork. But underlying all of this is the battle against procrastination. How do we actually start doing the work?
Procrastination, the old enemy. The key is understanding it's usually a habit triggered by discomfort.
Discomfort.
Yeah, even mild discomfort.
Right.
When you think about a task you find difficult or boring, like starting a big project or studying for a hard exam, your brain registers a little bit of pain or anxiety.
Okay.
Procrastination is simply the habit of immediately shifting your attention to something more pleasant to make that discomfort go away, even temporarily.
Yeah.
Checking email, scrolling social media.
And that relief is the reward that locks in the habit loop. Cue, unpleasant task, routine, switch focus, reward, momentary relief.
Precisely. And the belief gets built up. I work better under pressure anyway, or I'll feel more like doing it later, which usually isn't true.
So how do we break that loop? The source says focus on process, not product. What does that mean?
It means stop thinking about the daunting final product, the finished 20-page paper, the completed exam prep. That huge outcome is what triggers the anxiety. Instead, focus only on the process specifically, the units of time you'll spend working.
So don't think I have to write this whole paper, think I will work on this paper for the next 25 minutes.
Exactly. You engage the habitual zombie part of your brain. It doesn't worry about the huge task. It just follows the routine. Okay, time to work for X minutes. This bypasses the anxiety trigger.
And that leads directly to the Pomodoro technique.
The Pomodoro is brilliant because it's a pre-packaged process focus. You set a timer traditionally 25 minutes, and you commit to working only on your chosen task with focused attention until the timer goes off. No distractions.
Just 25 minutes. That feels manageable, even for a big task.
It does. And then, crucially, when the timer rings, you must take a short break. 5 minutes or so, get up, stretch, maybe grab that coffee, do something enjoyable. That break is the reward for your focused effort.
So you're training your brain. Focused work, reward.
Yes, you complete several Pomodoros with short breaks and then maybe take a longer break. It builds focus endurance and makes starting less painful because you're only ever committing to the next 25-minute chunk, not the whole mountain.
A very practical tool for getting that zombie mode working for you. Okay, finally, let's talk about test taking itself. All the learning culminates here. Preparation is obviously key.
Absolutely. And Richard Felder's checklist is a good guide. Did you actually work the homework problems yourself? Did you work with classmates, explaining things to each other? Did you try outlining solutions quickly under time pressure? And critically, did you get enough sleep?
Sleep again. It seems to be the foundation for everything.
It really is. The source calls it the single most important test prep step. Pulling an all-nighter destroys your ability to think clearly, retrieve information accurately, and avoid simple mistakes. Sacrificing sleep for cramming is almost always counterproductive.
Okay, assuming we're prepared and slept well, are there strategies during the test?
Yes. A really powerful one is the hard start, jump to easy technique.
Hard start. That sounds stressful.
It's a strategic stress. When you get the test, quickly scan it and identify what looks like the hardest problem for you. Spend just a minute or two actually starting it, reading it carefully, maybe jotting down an initial idea or formula.
Good then. You stop, even if you haven't solved it.
Yes. If you're stuck after a minute or two, put a mark next to it and immediately jump to the easiest problem you can find on the test and solve that one completely.
Why do that? Why waste time on the hard one first?
You're loading the hard problem into your diffuse mode. By focusing intensely on it for a short period, you activate the neural networks related to it. Then, while your focus mode is calmly working on the easy problem and building your confidence, getting you points, your diffuse mode is working away in the background on that hard problem.
Like the Poincaré bus moment, but engineered during the test.
Exactly. When you finish the easy problems and loop back to that hard one later in the test, you might find that the next step, or a completely different approach, just pops into your head. It also prevents you from getting bogged down and wasting too much time on one hard problem early on. The I'm still in effect again.
Smart. Guarantees you get the points for the easy stuff and gives your background processing a chance on the tough ones. What about just managing test anxiety itself? The sweaty palms, the racing heart?
That physical response is real, but the interpretation is key. Those symptoms, faster heart rate, adrenaline, are signs of arousal. You can choose to label that arousal as fear or as excitement.
Reframe the story you tell yourself about the feeling.
Precisely. Instead of thinking, oh no, I'm panicking, this is terrible, consciously tell yourself, okay, my body is getting ready. This energy means I'm excited to show what I know. Let's do this. It sounds simple, but cognitively reframing the physical sensation from threat to challenge can significantly reduce debilitating anxiety and improve performance.
This really raises an important question, doesn't it? We've covered so many techniques, but the thread running through it all is that mastery, even in really tough subjects, isn't some mystical gift. It's built through these simple, repeatable strategies.
Yeah, it's about the toggling between focus and diffuse, the strategic resting, the deliberate practice. It's a system you can learn and apply. So for you, the listener, it boils down to this toolkit: chunking information to free up your working memory, using spaced repetition so memories actually stick, tapping into your visual brain with things like the memory palace or equation poems, and, crucially, changing your relationship with failure, seeing it as part of the sculpting process that builds talent.
It makes learning feel much more empowering, less dependent on innate genius.
Which leads to a final thought to leave you with. We live in a culture that often celebrates speed, quick thinking, fast answers, intuition. But look at the experts. When solving complex physics problems, they actually tend to slow down at the beginning compared to novices.
They take longer. Why?
They take more time, maybe 45 seconds versus a novice's 30, to carefully categorize the problem based on its deep underlying principles, rather than just jumping in based on surface features. They let the diffuse mode connect the problem to the right conceptual framework before attacking it.
So could it be that strategic slowness, that patience to let the diffuse mode engage, to fully contextualize, to choose the right tools before starting, is actually a hallmark of real expertise, maybe even genius, something to experiment with? That's a fantastic point to ponder. So what does this all mean for you? It means your potential isn't fixed. It's shaped by strategy, by practice, by understanding how your own mind works. Your ability to learn and master complex things is far more under your control than you might think. Go deep.